the economy's headed towards disaster. There's really no way around it. It's going to crash at some point, and everyone's closing their eyes and praying it doesn't crash. It's completely engineered by the tech companies. When that happens, then the people cry for a king. A king can unite them against the oligarchy. And what a king does is often cancel debt. I think in the next year, you will see these major signals. You will see a more strengthened relationship between China and the United States. It's very possible in 2028, Trump runs as the vice president for the Republican Party, and Obama runs as the vice presidential candidate for the Democratic Party. It doesn't really matter who's at the top of the ticket, because it's really Obama versus Trump. And in that scenario, Trump wins easily against Obama.
I'm pleased to welcome back to the show Xueqin Jiang, host of Predictive History on YouTube and Substack. Check out his work, YouTube channel, link down below. He's got a great channel and a lot of interesting information there. Welcome back to the show, Xu. I'm excited to talk to you today about China and the US, the AI bubble in the tech sector, and as well the future of digital currencies in the West. So very varied topics today, very top of mind topics. Welcome back.
Thanks a lot, David. Thanks for inviting me back.
Yeah, for sure. We had a great conversation about the Middle East last time. Jiang was on and he talked about what he thinks is going to happen with not just the Middle East but the world. Check out the link down below for our last interview, and potentially we're looking at a third world war. Let's pivot from that today and talk about first China and the U.S. As you know, this week, Jiang, President Trump and President Xi of China met to discuss a new trade deal, and some secessions were made on both sides. On China's side, they agreed to not ban the export of certain critical minerals, and on the U.S. side, they've lowered tariffs a little bit. And additionally, China agreed to buy again U.S. soybeans. So this is a good step forward. Markets in the U.S. Didn't respond negatively to this, although there wasn't a huge surge either. In your opinion, was this significant progress, or are we just treading on, the same ground here? Keep in mind that there was supposed to be a 100% tariff starting November 1st, today, but obviously that's no longer happening.
Yeah, so I'm very optimistic about this relationship. So I think that President Trump and President Xi meeting for the first time in 7-8 years, it's to mark a major turnaround in U.S.-China relations. I believe that in the next year or two, we will see a major rapprochement between China and the United States. And the reasoning is very simple. These nations are independent on each other. China needs the U.S. market, and the U.S. needs Chinese to buy U.S. dollars. It's that simple. So I think for the past 7-8 years, there was a lot of posturing going around. And we have to remember, in the first Trump term, the relationship is very different from the second Trump term. In the first Trump term, there was a lot of animosity between the two sides. So as you may recall, the United States kicked out Chinese journalists, and China retaliated by kicking out American journalists from the New York Times, Washington Post, and Wall Street Journal, and they've never returned. The Chinese have closed a American consulate. The Americans canceled the Peace Corps in China. So there was a lot of animosity between these two sides, and we don't see that in the second term. So I am very optimistic about this relationship improving over the next year. So remember that President Trump is scheduled to visit China in April of next year, and then President Xi will visit the United States for a conference in December. And so I think that over the next year, behind the scenes, a lot of major issues will be hashed out, and we'll see an improved status between China and the United States.
Yes. So why even issue the threat of a 100% tariff in the first place, from Trump's side, that is?
Yeah, so we have to remember that Trump has a unique governing style. He comes from reality TV. He comes from the World Wrestling Entertainment System. So he likes bluster. Before a big showdown, everyone, all the actors make a big talk, make huge threats to draw attention. And that's what Trump did in this situation. No one really thought that Trump would actually go through with the 100% tariffs. If you just watch the markets, people were already factoring in the fact that Trump will tackle, right? That Trump would ultimately cave in. And so, and that's why we didn't see a surge in markets after the meeting, because everyone just priced down it already in. So yeah, that's what Trump is known for. He's known for bluster, and he's going to keep on doing this, right? And remember, what Trump's likes to do is play things up before. I mean, it's basically drama, right? I mean, the one thing that you learn in TV is to create as much conflict as possible and then find a resolution, and that's what he did here.
Okay, we have to look at what's ahead for not just the U.S.'s economy and administration, but also what's ahead for China. China is about to issue in full their 15th five-year plan. They've drafted up recommendations, but as I'm aware right now, they haven't yet released the details in full yet. A blueprint is being drafted. Recommendations have been announced. This is some of their recommendations. Now, again, the full details haven't yet been released. They're meeting end of October, which I believe is now. Greater sci-fi tech reliance is one of them. Broader opening up, according to Commerce Minister Wang Wentao. China will take the initiative to open more broadly in the next 5 years, focusing on the services sectors. Efforts will be made to expand market access. This is kind of building modernized industrial system is another one, and this is the information released by the State Council of the People's Republic of China so far. Do you have any more information about this? And generally speaking, what are you looking forward to for China's development in the next 5 years?
Look, I'll be very blunt with you, David. I don't really pay much attention to these five-year plans, like these modernization efforts, focus on AI, creating, a modernized financial economy. And the reason why is that China has always had a problem, and it's a consistent problem for the past 4,000 years, which is an inefficient allocation of capital. Whenever you have state planning going on, the capital always goes to those who are most well connected to the system. So those who are closest to power, and the capital doesn't go to those who are the most energetic, the most innovative, those who are going to actually produce a product. And this has been a consistent problem in the state planning system in China for the past 4,000 years. And so they talk a good game, but the reality is that capital has been monopolized by the powerful. And there really isn't that much incentive for Chinese to innovate. I mean, that's just the reality on the ground in China.
There is a vibrant tech sector right now in China that some say is even rivaling the U.S. I mean, clearly there's been some success in innovating, right? China, of course, has, as you know, for example, the world's largest EV production right now, world's largest solar panel production, so on and so forth. I'm just naming a few things. So some would argue that this is kind of working, no?
Well, I mean, we can have this argument back and forth, but if you just look at the EV sector specifically, then what a lot of Chinese economists will tell you is that there's overproduction in the system. And the reason why is just government subsidies have been flooding the system. And so China needs to export these cars because China doesn't have the domestic capacity to buy up these cars. And that's why the Europeans are kind of angry about the situation, because China's dumping these cars in the European market at very cheap rates. It's debatable whether or not even China makes money off these cars, and it's destroying the European car sector. So that's why people are kind of angry at China right now. But again, I think the problem is that you have overcapacity, you have poor state planning, which produces excess capacity.
There's these pictures of Xi Jinping shaking hands with Trump now. Apparently they're best friends or something like that. The bigger question right now is, Jiang, what is Xi's ultimate ambition, and what does Trump want for himself and for America? Ultimately, do these objectives or ambitions clash, or can they work together in the next few years?
Right. So in geopolitics, I think a general rule that always applies is that the conflict within nation states is always greater, more intense than the conflict between nation states. So what I mean by that is that both President Xi and President Trump are looking to consolidate their domestic power bases. And they do that by ensuring that those who are loyal to them are inserted into positions of power. And so that's what both are doing. And they're both using these US-China trade talks. They're both using the geopolitical landscape in order to achieve this goal. So for President Xi, it's very simple. He wants to continue to consolidate his power base within China. And he wants a more stable relationship with the United States. Those are his two major policy goals for the next 2 to 4 years.
Before we continue with the video, let's talk about our sponsor today, Odoo. Odoo is a complete business management suite trusted by over 15 million users across the globe. Whether you're a freelancer or scaling a growing company, Odoo brings everything into one place: sales, CRM, accounting, inventory, HR, project management, and more. It's all fully centralized and integrated. Your CRM connects to your invoicing, your sales flow into your inventory, and your HR tools sync with payroll. Everything communicates in real time, reducing manual tasks and errors. And Odoo grows with your business. Start with one app for free with unlimited hosting and support. Then add more as you scale. When you're ready to go all in, access the full suite starting at just $24.90 per month. Check out the link in the description down below to try Odoo and simplify your business operations. But is it true, though, that China has ambitions to become a global superpower, both economically and militarily? And if so, does that mean that there's going to be collision between the Chinese and the US?
Yeah, so at the beginning of President Xi's term, he introduced a concept called the China Dream. And it's a very ambiguous, very nebulous concept. And people have been debating back and forth what this concept means. Western commentators believe that the China Dream is for China to rise in the world stage and take a more assertive role, to basically shape the world according to China's needs and ambitions. I disagree with this assessment. I think the China Dream really is about maintaining national sovereignty, about maintaining territorial integrity. This means ensuring that Taiwan does not declare independence. That's a very important part of the China Dream. But I think primarily China is concerned about its own domestic issues and maintaining its national sovereignty, and that includes negotiating with America and other great powers on a peer-to-peer basis. That's what the China Dream means.
Do you think that China, in the opening up phase, if it opens up even more, could risk destabilizing itself? In other words, the government may risk some sort of revolution whereby people demand a democracy?
That's not likely in China. Democracy is a foreign concept in China. There is really much of an appetite for democracy. What people in China want is stability. They want some prosperity, but they're willing to, the Chinese term is 吃苦, eat bitter. So they don't have to have the American lifestyle of air conditioning, 2 SUVs, their own house, but they want life to be stable, harmonious, and that's really the Chinese dream. So China doesn't really want that much. Yeah.
Okay, let's talk about what's happening with the U.S. then, and the future of the U.S. This is an interesting article from NPR. Hundreds of scholars say the U.S. is swiftly heading towards authoritarianism. A survey of more than 500 political scientists find that the vast majority think the United States is moving swiftly from liberal democracy towards some sort of authoritarianism. In the benchmark survey known as Bright Line Watch, U.S.-based professors rate the performance of American democracy on a scale from 0, complete dictatorship, to 100, which is perfect democracy. I'm not even sure what a perfect democracy means, but okay. After President Trump's election in November, scholars gave American democracy rating of 67. Several weeks into Trump's second term, that figure plummeted to 55. Okay, I haven't seen the details of this particular survey. It could just be partisan, but if you just look at things objectively, is there any truth to some of the sentiment here?
Well, if you look at the first Trump term, you compare it to the second Trump term, it's night and day. Remember, in the first Trump term, there was vocal dissent in the streets. There were they weren't violent protests, but there were lots of protests against the Trump presidency. The media attacked Trump every day. Remember, back in the first Trump term, there's something called the Russiagate, right? Robert Mueller, a former FBI director, conducted an investigation to see whether or not Trump was a Russian agent. And even within Trump's cabinet, there was vocal dissent. Remember, Mark Milley, the former chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, basically said that he called the Chinese and said, "Don't worry about this guy. We know he is a bit unpredictable, but we have control here. We're like everything's under our control, right?" So Trump didn't really have that much power, and he was always on the defensive. The Democrats impeached him twice. After Trump lost the midterms, the Democrats immediately started impeachment proceedings. So Trump was really on the defensive in the first term. On the second term, it's the complete opposite. Trump very much is on the offensive. These ICE raids, it's really debatable what these ICE raids are about, right? Because you should look at deportation numbers. The absolute number of deportation under Trump is still lower than that under Obama. So what's ICE for? And some people have speculated that ICE is meant to be a embryonic secret police. They're testing out the possibility of a secret police. Now, you also have the National Guard being deployed to Democratic strongholds like Portland and Chicago. And there's talk of next year Trump deploying the National Guard to all states. And now there's talk of war against Venezuela in the Middle East, possibly Ukraine. And so that gives Trump emergency war powers. Trump has discussed the possibility of invoking the Insurrection Act. Trump has played around the idea of running for a third term. I don't know how he'll do that, but I believe that given everything that we've seen so far, I think he has the intention of possibly running for a third term. So we're seeing a rapid decline in democracy in America. I think it's very hard to miss. What's really depressing to see, though, is the lack of opposition. So the Democratic Party has not been able to sustain opposition against Trump, and we can see that from the government shutdown. Has anyone noticed that the government has shut down? Do people realize that there'll be millions and millions of Americans who will not receive food stamps and they will starve, and there'll be possibly riots? Given the possibility of civil unrest and possibly civil war, you would think the Democrats would want to quickly come to an agreement with the Trump administration, but they're not doing that. They're just sort of sitting back and waiting for the chaos to erupt so that they can win the midterms in November. Next November. But who says there'll be midterms next November? So there's really a lack of strategic foresight from the Democrats. They're very passive, and because there's no effective opposition, Trump can basically do whatever he wants.
Okay, but obviously the American people, or the people in the West, would not accept an authoritarian dictatorship or even a monarchy if the opportunity presented itself, right? If people voted, hey, you have here a republic, or you could choose between a monarchy or some sort of dictatorship. I mean, I don't. What do you think is going to happen today?
Well, look. I mean, you can make the legitimate argument that the choice isn't between monarchy and democracy. The choice is between monarchy and oligarchy. You can make the argument that America has not been democracy for a long time, ever since 2008 financial crisis, when Obama bailed out the oligarchs and screwed over the people. And then you had COVID, which even further economic inequalities. And so you can make the argument that for the past 10, 15 years, America has transitioned into a full-scale oligarchy. And you can just look at what's happening in the American economy, where the only thing that's up is the stock market, and only about 1% or the top 10% or 90% of American stocks. So the system is geared specifically towards the top 10%. America has become an oligarchy. And if you look at historically, when that happens, then the people cry for a king. Why? Because first of all, a king can unite them against the oligarchy. And what a king does is often cancel debt, right? The king, his first act is often a jubilee, where he cancels the debts of the people. And the other thing that he will do is redistribute wealth, primarily land, in a way that furthers the interests of the people. So if you're an American citizen, okay, if you're just an average American citizen, you're heavily in debt, you have a mortgage, you have credit card debt, you're facing delinquency, your economic prospects aren't that great. Would you prefer the system to stay as it is, or would you prefer a king? I would say most people would choose a king. So I'll make you. So it's possible that in 2028, it's very possible in 2028, Trump runs as the vice president for the Republican Party. And Obama runs as the vice presidential candidate for the Democratic Party. It doesn't really matter who's at top of the ticket because it's really Obama versus Trump. And in that scenario, Trump wins easily against Obama.
Interesting. Well, you've called Trump's win, so let's see what happens again in 2028. Is that legal though for a president to have run 2 terms to run third time as a vice president? I have to look into that. Comment below if you know what the legalities of that. Yeah.
Look, the famous saying is that it's wrong, it's immoral, it's unconventional, but it's not illegal. Okay, I mean, so the U.S. political system is built on consensus, on norms, on certain values that people share together. So you have someone like Trump come in, he actually doesn't share any of these values. There's very little the political system can do against this sort of person.
Let's talk about stocks now. You mentioned the stock market. So yes, stocks are at all-time highs, and especially tech stocks that are leading the charge. Tech is accounting for most of the gains. Tech is accounting for most of the CapEx spending in the S&P 500. And just today, I learned from another economist I was speaking to that without data centers, GDP growth in the first quarter was only about 0.1% if you take that out.
Yeah.
So tell us about your views on tech and AI and the markets.
Look, I'm not in the industry, so I don't even know what I read in the news, but what the news tells me is, number one, you have certain AI companies that are financing each other. So it's essentially a bubble that they have to all prop up in order to survive. Number two is that people have not figured out how to make money off AI yet. Sam Altman recently came out and said that OpenAI will allow sexting, right? That's a sign of desperation. It's just telling people that ChatGPT, they haven't really been able to monetize it properly. In fact, what I've heard, what I've read is that for every new subscriber, ChatGPT loses money. It's just a money losing proposition. Okay, that's number two. They haven't figured out how to make money. A third thing, and you point this out, is the exorbitant cost of these data centers. They're extremely expensive to run, and they suck up all communities' fresh water and electricity resources. Americans are seeing their electricity costs skyrocket. Why? Because these data centers are so expensive to run. And so you have this weird situation where the entire economy is just basically the AI bubble. And these corporations are using government subsidies in order to build these data centers, in order to exploit the water and the electricity resources of the community, and then passing on to the consumer. And they still don't know how to make money off this thing. So, I mean, the economy is headed towards disaster. There's really no way around it. And so the question then is, can Americans manage an implode? Can the Americans manage a controlled implosion of the economy? And that's why I think we're seeing a lot of talks of civil war, of social unrest, because if there's social unrest, then it's possible for you to do a controlled implosion of the economy. Otherwise, everything just blows up in your face. There's this journalist, Andrew Sorkin, who's going around talking about 1929. He's getting a lot of coverage, and he's saying, look, we're heading towards another stock market crash. And this sounds like predictive programming to me. It's preparing people for the possibility of a major financial implosion within the United States. And this financial implosion is something that they want to manage in order to reduce the repercussions and consequences.
So you think this whole bubble is somewhat engineered by the tech companies, or I don't know what's causing this?
Yeah, it's completely engineered by the tech companies, right? So if you look at the financing, it's these companies lending money to each other. It's like, I give you $1 billion for a puppy, and then you give me and then I buy, and then you give me $1 billion for my,
sure.
I don't know.
It's circular financing. You're right. It's companies investing in each other, taking stakes in each other, and becoming bigger as either monopolies or, like you said earlier, oligopolies. But isn't that good for investors, at least in the short term? I mean, we're everybody, they're lifting the entire the high tide is lifting all boats here, right? They're lifting the entire market.
Look, the reality is that America and China are moving towards the same model, which is state planning, right? State financing. And again, the issue that you have is an inefficient allocation of capital. The money should be going to small-time entrepreneurs to, build restaurants, to build businesses that employ people. The reality is that AI the irony is that the more successful AI is, the more the economy loses jobs, right? So Amazon has announced that it's going to lay off like 30,000 workers, and this is just the like tip of the spear. Like if AI really works, then ideally you would reduce employment by like millions and millions of people. So that's the paradox that America is finding itself in. If AI doesn't work, the economy implodes. But if AI does work, then everyone loses his or her job. That's kind of a ridiculous situation to be in.
So what would trigger this pop in the bubble?
Well, I mean, again, it's engineered, right? So it's a controlled implosion. So it's basically these companies getting together with the banks and saying, you know what, let's cash out now, okay? And that's what we saw in the 2008 financial crisis, right? Because remember, it was an engineered collapse because everyone knew that the system was unsustainable. These banks were heavily in debt because of CDOs and all that. But what really started the crisis was the fact that you had these big hedge fund managers taking out bets against these CDOs. So basically, it was an engineered collapse. Goldman Sachs was making a lot of money off CDOs, but what they realized is they can make even more money betting against their own CDOs, and that's what happened. I mean, Goldman Sachs got ridiculously wealthy off the collapse, and that's something that people don't really discuss, even though it was Goldman Sachs who created the crisis, and it was Goldman Sachs who created the collapse.
Right now, the markets are not signaling any sort of economic problems, right? Everything's going to all-time highs, and there doesn't seem to be a lot of volatility. There doesn't seem to be a lot of fear in the markets. Do you think that sentiment is an accurate reflection?
Well, I mean, everyone has their head in the sand because if you are an institutional investor, right? If you're a pension fund, if you're like, BlackRock, Vanguard, like what can you do about this situation, right? I mean, it's just like pray and hope nothing happens. So, this reminds me of a joke where, this car is spiraling down a mountain at 100 miles per hour, and the guy in the passenger seat is like has closed his eyes, and they land safely. And then the passenger says to the driver, "How are you able to stay calm all this time?" And the driver says, "Well, I have my eyes closed as well." Okay, and that's the situation we are in. The entire stock market, the entire economy, the entire financial sector, it's this car spiraling down a mountain, 100 miles per hour. It's going to crash at some point, and everyone's closing their eyes and praying it doesn't crash.
The other development is the introduction of the Genius Act over the summer. So stable coins will be backed by U.S. Treasuries, is what the act states, and this may be a precursor to state issuance of stable coins. And more broadly, there's a large movement right now to tokenize a lot of real world assets and securities, not just by the state level, but also by large institutions, BlackRock, for example. So tell us about the digitization of financial assets and whether or not that's going to change your assessment here.
Yeah, so I think digital currency, tokenization, it's all just a fancy work around the idea of financial repression, right? So when you have an economy in this sort of situation where a lot of people are in debt, where the market is overheated, you need to control financial transactions. And the way you do that is by creating a lot of friction within within these transactions. This is something that China has been doing for the past 2 to 4 years. And listen, it's been remarkably successful. And so as long as you have financial repression, as long as people can't ever, do a run on the banks, that's a metaphor, but they don't do a run on the banks anymore. But if they can't do a run on the banks, then the system is still stable and the system can still chug along, even though it's basically semi-comatose. So that's the idea of digital currency. The problem, though, is how do you get people to agree to digital currency, to trade, like to stop using cash? You can do that in China because of COVID, right? Because the COVID crisis created this implosion of the financial economy, and it forced people to stay at homes, and it forced people to use software as a means of daily transactions. So the most common thing was just to get delivery people to mail groceries and goods to your house. And so that's what started the introduction of digital currency. So America needs to manufacture a crisis in order to fully introduce digital currency.
Are you bullish then on currencies, digital currencies, cryptos, all cryptos, or just certain ones?
Well, I mean, listen, I'm not wealthy. So if I had a choice, I put all my resources into the US dollar. Because if the economy gets worse, if there's wars that break out, I still think the U.S. dollar gives me mobility, gives me flexibility. All the currencies are based on the U.S. dollar. Okay, I mean, it doesn't make sense for me to buy gold or Bitcoin because I'm not an institutional investor. I'm not a long-term investor, and I don't have that much wealth.
This is
But
an interesting topic that I want to ask you about, the tokenization of the fiat dollars, meaning putting it on a stable coin. Would your life change? Would your life be better if, let's say, the dollars that you have are put in the blockchain? And let's say, suppose you don't have a bank account because you no longer need a bank account. Everything you have is in stable coins. You just put it in a cold wallet or a hot wallet. You self-custody your own money, and you're able to send money and receive money from anywhere in the world without friction, instantaneously. Would that,
yeah,
would that be a future you like?
yeah, that's a great point. And listen, I have to say this. I live in China. I've been living in China for a long time. The introduction of digital currency has made my life so much more convenient, right? Because now every transaction is seamless. I go to a restaurant, I use my app to pick the items I want on the menu, and then I pay with my app. It's so easy, and it's so safe because I'm never afraid of losing cash. Thieves are out of a job in China. The problem, though, is what the government could do with this power, right? Because it's very feasible that you say something stupid online and have a tendency to do that, and the government says, you know what, we're going to teach you that lesson, so we're going to freeze this account for the next week, right? They can do that with programmable digital currency. So I'm lucky in that that hasn't happened to me, but there are people who face this issue in China, and so
everywhere in the world. It happened in
possibly
Canada
everywhere
too.
in the world, possibly everywhere in the world, right? So that's like that. So with digital currency, you're giving basically all your power to the government because you've eliminated anonymity from the economy. Okay, that's a concern with digital currency. So yeah, it makes your life more convenient, but it gives the government so much power over you as the individual. Also, remember, digital currency can be controlled, so the government can actually track all your behavior and limit the way you spend your money. I mean, that sounds great because, listen, that means you can't gamble. That means you can't buy alcohol. That means you cannot buy cigarettes. It's aligned with government policy. And, the entire purpose is to make you a more healthy person. But at the end of the day, that destroys the social contract, right? That destroys all your individual agency. That it destroys the entire idea of individuality. So is that a future we want?
Yeah, I guess good point. So, all right. It seems like we've got a lot of problems to ponder. Shoot. But let's end on this note. Anything that you're looking forward to in terms of the development of not just our economy, but society, that will greatly improve our standard of living, if there is such a thing? Yeah,
listen, I think that this U.S.-China relationship is key because, China has all this excess cheap labor that it needs to export. And remember, before the trade war that Trump started in his first term, Chinese goods flowing to the United States allowed Americans a higher standard of living. And so now that you remove Chinese goods, or most Chinese goods, then inflation has gone up. So the situation is that China is facing deflation and America is facing inflation. So I think that if U.S.-China relations were to improve and China was able to export this deflation overseas, then people's standard of living would improve drastically. And so that's something that I'm looking forward to. I think in the next year, you will see these major signals that the U.S.-China is reaching a rapprochement. And it's entirely possible that you will see a more strengthened relationship between China and the United States. Listen, at the end of the day, China and the United States are status quo powers. They want things to stay the same. Russia, Iran, North Korea, Venezuela, these are revisionist powers. They want things to change. And so the United States and China benefit from working with each other as opposed to fighting each other. And I think that's something that both nations have come to understand after many years of fighting. So I'm looking forward to that.
Okay, good. All right, thank you very much. Well, we're looking forward to following you. Where can we follow your work?
Yeah, so if you're interested in my geopolitical analysis, I write on Substack. So it's Predictive History Substack. Okay, I'm pretty easy to find. If you are on Substack. I also have a Twitter account, Xueqin Jiang, and then I also have a YouTube channel as you mentioned. But if you really want to know more about my geopolitical analysis, then the best place is Substack.
Okay, good. We'll put the links to Substack and YouTube down below. You've written a bunch of interesting stuff, so please check it out. Thank you very much for coming on the show once again, Jiang. Appreciate it.
Well, thanks for having me. It's been a great conversation.
Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe, follow Jiang down below.